Hey, welcome to the Event Answer Studio. Today I want to show you how to put together this mermaid tail balloon garland as well as an easy cover for a circle backdrop stand. The main body of the balloon garland is made up of 15 11-inch balloons in Caribbean blue, pink, spring lilac, and chrome purple, but you could use any color you like to suit your party. I'm also using an electric balloon inflator to get all of my balloons to size. To start off, I'm going to inflate 6 balloons in an assortment of colors to approximately 10 inches in diameter, and then progressively make sets of 6 that are about a ½ inch smaller than the previous set. Once I've inflated 2 balloons, I'm going to tie them together into a pair by overlapping the nozzles, wrapping them around twice, and tying them together in a simple knot. Once I've got 3 of these pairs that are all the same size, I'm going to tie them together into a cluster of 6 balloons. So take 2 pairs, overlap them so that the nozzles touch in the center, and then wrap 1 balloon from each of those pairs around them, locking them together into a quad. Now to this quad, we're going to add our 3rd pair by snugging it in so that the nozzles of that new pair are touching the nozzles of the quad. Wrap those 2 new balloons all the way around and then twist them around each other, locking all those nozzles into a central knot, creating a cluster of 6 balloons. I then repeated this step until I had 10 of these 6 balloon clusters in progressively smaller sizes, each of those balloons being about a ½ inch smaller than the cluster before it. To make the base of our mermaid tail look nice and full, I'm going to inflate 6 16-inch balloons till they're almost their full size. Then I'm going to flip them over, let a little bit of air out, and press the balloons down, making them nice and round. I'm then going to tie the nozzle in a knot, and then to that knot, I'm going to tie an empty 260 balloon around the base of it, and that 260 balloon is how we'll tie this 16-inch balloon into our garland later. To accent the garland, I'm going to inflate 16 5 and 7-inch balloons and tie them into mini clusters. So I'm going to take one of these balloons, inflate it to 3 pumps of air, hold it underneath one of my fingers that's holding onto the air pump, and inflate a second balloon to the exact same size. Then, just like the larger balloons, we're going to tie these together into a pair by wrapping the nozzles around twice and tying them together into a knot. It should be noted that the purple chrome balloons are actually 7 inches in diameter instead of 5 inches, so to make those look their best, I'm going to inflate those to 6 pumps of air before tying them off into pairs. I'm then going to join 2 pairs together into a quad by overlapping them so the nozzles touch and twisting 1 balloon around them, locking them together into a quad. Now to make these mini clusters, I'm going to have 1 quad with 1 of each of the colors in it and 1 quad that is all 1 color. And then I'm going to tie these 2 quads together using a piece of 260 balloon that I've cut in half. So I'm just going to take the end of that 260 balloon and tie it to the nozzles of each of the quads. An easy way to do this is to pinch the nozzle of the 260 against the nozzles of the quad, pull it tight, and wrap it in a figure-8 pattern around 2 of the balloons in that quad. In the same way, tie the second quad to the other end of the 260, and this will create our mini clusters. I made 8 clusters in total, making sure I had 2 clusters in each of my color combinations. Now we can tie all of our clusters together into a garland. So I'm going to secure them using some empty 260 balloons. You could always use fishing line or curling ribbon to tie these clusters together. So I'm going to take the end of my 260, pinch it against the nozzles of my smallest balloon cluster, and stretch that 260 around 2 of the balloons a couple times in a figure-8 pattern, and that will lock it to the cluster. Now I'm going to get my next size up of cluster and nestle it right against that first cluster, paying attention to where I'm placing the colors so I've got a nice combination of balloon colors next to each other. Once they're nice and snug, I'm going to pull that 260 tight, wrapping it across the nozzles of the new cluster, and then wrapping it around 2 balloons in that new cluster in a figure-8 pattern, locking the 2 of them together. I'll repeat these steps as I add my progressively larger clusters until I get all the way to the end. Now at some point you will get to the end of your 260 balloon, and when that happens, you can just tie another 260 to the very end of that and keep going. Once all 10 clusters are secured together, take any remaining 260 tail and wrap it in a figure-8 pattern around a couple balloons, and then just let it go and it'll disappear into the inside of the garland. You could easily secure this mermaid tail to a wall using some command hooks, but today I'm going to be using this circle backdrop stand. It's 7.5 feet tall and wide, and I'll be curving my tail along the right side of this frame. But I don't want to see through this frame, so I'm going to cover it with this iridescent blue sequin backdrop panel. It's 8 by 8 feet wide, and the colors blend beautifully with the balloons I'm using today. So to secure this to the frame, I'll be using some of these mini clamps that I picked up at my hardware store. They're super inexpensive, but have a lot of strength to hold this backdrop to the frame. I'm going to show you what this looks like from the back side, and then we'll turn it around when we go to put the balloons on. So first of all, you want to find the center point of your fabric, and once you've got that, you're going to overlap it in front of the frame and then up over the top, and then hold that in place and clamp it with one of our little clamps. Next, I want to secure the two sides at the very middle point of the circle. So I'm going to pull the fabric over, following that line of sequence so that they stay nice and level across the backdrop, and pull the fabric so it's taut. Then once I get to the edge of the frame, I'm going to wrap it around and take one of my clamps and put it on the back side of the frame. Now I always want these clamps to be facing out the back and not out the sides, because you might potentially see the clamps if they're pointing outwards, but they'll be nicely hidden behind the frame if we do it on the back side. So once I've got this side done, I'm going to repeat it on the opposite side, making sure I pull that fabric nice and taut, and then I'm going to go up and do the 2 points between the clamps, pulling the fabric nice and taut and clamping it in place. Now because my backdrop is a little sheer, I'm going to roll up this excess fabric and then clamp it in place so you can't see these extra sequins hanging behind. I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom side, rolling this fabric up before clamping it in place. This will allow us to see the curvature of the bottom of the arch instead of the fabric just draping straight down to the floor. Now on the right side of the frame, everywhere we've put a clamp, I'm going to tie an empty 260 balloon around the body of that clamp with a double knot. The tail end of these 260 balloons will allow us to tie our balloon garland directly to our backdrop frame. Next, I'm going to stand the balloon garland upright so that the smallest balloons are right in line with the top of the circle arch and the largest balloons are touching the floor. With it roughly held in place, I'm going to take one of those 260s we tied around the clamps, pull it tight, and wrap it around a couple of balloons in the garland. Now you may notice that there's a sharp bend in my garland and it's not following that nice smooth curve of our circle backdrop. So I'm going to rotate individual clusters around until that balloon garland has that overall curve. By just rotating and moving a couple balloons around, you can completely change up how a balloon garland sits. Once I'm happy with its overall shape, I'm then going to take the rest of those 260s and finish tying it to the backdrop frame. Now let's move down to the floor and attach all of those 16-inch balloons. I'm going to nestle these balloons one at a time against the bottom of the arch and then stretch the 260 that's attached to it around a couple of the balloons in the garland, and that will hold it in place. Now you could always tie these 16-inch balloons into an extra cluster and tie it to the end, but by securing these balloons one at a time, we can really flare out the bottom of our mermaid tail, transforming this simple balloon garland into a beautiful statement piece. Now the two balloons that turn this into a true mermaid tail are these 25-inch foil curve balloons, and when you put them end to end like this, it gives you a beautiful large tail at the end of our garland. This is a great formation if you've got lots of space for your tail, but because my backdrop is right against my living room ceiling, I'm actually going to rotate these around and nestle them closer together. It still gives us that beautiful mermaid effect, but in a tighter space. So whichever way you want to arrange your balloons, you're going to hold the nozzles right next to each other, take an empty 260 balloon, and tie the two nozzles together really tightly. Then to keep these two balloons in the correct orientation, I'm going to take these glue dashes and put 4 to 5 of them all along the edge of the balloon, right where these two balloons are touching. So if I hold them right where I want them, you can take the furthest point where they touch, and then everywhere between that and the nozzles, you're going to line with glue dashes. Now I'm only showing 2 here, but in the end I did end up using 4 or 5 of them to hold them nice and secure. So go ahead and remove the paper backing from that adhesive and then hold them really tightly so that adhesive has a chance to set. Now we can take our tail and nestle the nozzle end right up into the small balloon cluster at the end of our balloon garland so that you can't see the nozzles of that foil balloon. Then you're going to take that 260 that's tied to the end and wrap it around a couple of the balloons in the garland, and that will hold it in place. Anywhere on the garland where there's a bit of a hole or we need a little bit more color and texture, that's where I'm going to add all of these mini clusters. So I'm going to take the 260 that's between these two little quads and wrap that 260 behind a balloon or two that's in the main garland. Once the 260 balloon is hidden from sight, you can then rotate those little quads around until you're happy with their placement. They can be spread apart to fill lots of space, or you can kind of squish them into a line to fill a narrower space. The mix of balloon sizes and colors gives our mermaid tail a real rich texture and makes it interesting to look at. To accent my mermaid tail, I've made some bubbles out of crystal clear 11 and 5-inch balloons. I've tied a 260 to that cluster and then thread a safety pin right through the end of that nozzle that I can just pin directly to my backdrop fabric. Adding a cascade of bubbles down the left side of my backdrop balances out the mermaid tail on the right side, and they glow beautifully in the light of this happy birthday neon sign. I hope you're inspired by today's project, and if you'd like to make one of these as well, I'll have everything I used in today's build linked in the description box below. You can check out some of my other balloon builds over here, and until the next time, remember, stay creative everybody! Bye!